The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord. Today's first reading from the book of Exodus is a call to action on behalf of the alien, the widow, and the orphan. One of the best parts of being a student here at Notre Dame is that our university can help you answer this call. So 20 years ago, I signed up with the Center for Social Concerns to volunteer for a week at a Catholic organization called My Brother's Keeper in Brockton, Massachusetts. My Brother's Keeper had been founded by a former corporate executive who felt God wanted him to use his talent and his wealth to help the poor. And so he purchased a warehouse, filled it with donated furniture, and started giving out to those in need, such as the alien, the widow, and the orphan. My task was much less impressive. I was there to deliver furniture. At that time, I was a freshman and uncertain about where I was going with my life. And on my last day on the job, I had an encounter that I still remember. It was late in the afternoon, and I had just helped unload a sofa and bed to a young black mother with 2 kids. After arranging the furniture, we sat at her kitchen table, had a snack, and talked. Her apartment was tiny, and I was a little stunned by the absence of a television. So I asked her what she likes to do with her kids, and she replied that she likes to take them out in the evening and sit in the back patio and look up at the stars. The night sky, she said, is a gift from God that's easy to overlook. In one sense, the call to action in the book of Exodus is about helping people like this young mother with kids. It's about giving to those in need. But if that were the only point, Scripture would simply say as much. And yet there's more to the story. For we hear the Lord say, "You shall not molest or oppress an alien, for you were once aliens yourselves in the land of Egypt." In other words, this obligation to help flows from a shared history. The same idea carries over into the gospel when Jesus instructs us that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Our obligation to love flows from a shared humanity. What God is telling us in these readings, then, is that this call to action is not just to help and love our neighbor, it is also to activate the ties that bind us together, our shared history, our shared humanity, which is to say the truth that we are all God's children. This call to action is not merely about how we are supposed to work as Christians, it's also about how God works through us. When I think back to that late afternoon in Brockton, I now see God's fingerprints all over the place. I see them in the way that the man who founded My Brother's Keeper inspired my young 18-year-old self and nudged me toward the priesthood. I see God's fingerprints in the way Notre Dame can lower the barriers of race and class and have its students break bread with the poor. And I see those fingerprints in the vision I had of this mother showing her children the riches of the night sky. In fact, in my mind, I feel like I had been with them looking at those stars myself. A false memory, but one that has stayed with me ever since. There's an American author who once used the phrase temporal bandwidth, which is the width of your present, your now. So for those of us who can't remember what we were doing 5 minutes ago, we're constantly caught up with our smartphones and our devices, we inhabit a narrow bandwidth. It makes for narrow, short-sighted people. But when we expand our temporal bandwidth, we expand our sense of self, and our attachments to others thicken. Giving to those in need, helping the alien, the widow, and orphan expands our temporal bandwidth. It helps us see the connective tissue that binds us to those we might otherwise ignore. These encounters leave marks on the soul, and it's these memories of helping and of being helped that God uses to reveal himself and to teach us. And so it's through a broad temporal bandwidth that we properly learn how to love God with our whole soul, heart, and mind. For the only way that we can learn how to love is to retrieve the memories of those who have shown us such love. And the only way we can learn how to give is to call to mind those who have given radically of their wealth and talents. This retrieval of the past, this recovery of its lessons for us, helps us understand also where we need to go as the people of God. The Israelites were freed from Egypt so that they could create a more just society. You have been freed and loved and helped so that you might work to make our society more just. This kind of work of becoming our brother's keeper teaches us who we are and who God is. And it does so by showing us where we've come from and where we're called to go.